Well, hello. Good morning, everyone. It looks like it's about time to start, so um, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Julie Mitchell. I work for InGen Technologies. I'll give you a little bit of a background. I started out as an artist back in the early '90s, and I did a lot of work with design and development and things like that. I started working with web technologies when the web started getting some traction, getting some feet, and I just kind of stuck with that. And I wasn't a tech person. I wasn't a software engineer or even a computer science major. I was an artist that learned how to do art on the web, basically, and mostly through on site training, on the job training, and whatever was available to me at the time. Google was a great resource when it also got its legs. So you can still, my point is, you can still do this even if you don't start out in tech. You can get into the tech world later and through many different avenues. So, one of the things I'm going to talk about today is when you're designing anything really, when you have a message, you're going to have words. The words, how they look, are as important as the message that you're trying to convey, because fonts create a feeling. So it's not just what you're saying, but what it looks like to the viewer. Like in text, you've noticed you can send text, and sometimes your text is misconstrued. Uh, if you could only send a text with a certain kind of font each time, so you could kind of be sure that someone's going to receive that message in the way that you intended. Uh, Sometimes things don't always look like you think they're going to look. You can create that message that you're wanting to create for a particular site, whether that site's going to be corporate or a casual feel. Maybe you're doing a throwback sort of thing. Maybe you want it to be sort of dark and eerie or light and playful. What font you choose is going to have a big impact on the message you put forth. For instance, one of the clients that we have, it's more of a corporate client. The image on the left is the actual site. It's the font that they chose. It's called Roboto Slab. It's a very common, strong font that a lot of corporate feeling sites use. It gives you the sense that these people are they kind of know what they're doing in the message that they are trying to put across. If we used a different font, like let's say the one on the right, oh, this is my favorite thing and I love to use this everywhere, and this font on this site, it's going to give a lot more different of a message to say that I don't know if I can trust these guys to do corporate work. They seem like they're much too casual in their appearance. I just don't know that I can trust them to do what I need them to do. Now, this is one of my favorite sites for another reason. So I don't know if anybody else is familiar with Pit Viper, but they go old school on purpose. And if you're going to choose a font, if you're going to create a feel that's old school, you go all in. You do it completely. I'll go ahead and share their actual site too, so you can get a good feel. Like from the beginning, from the top to bottom, they are trying for an old school appearance, and they've succeeded. Now, when I first saw this, I thought, oh God, these people have not updated their site in a really long time. And then I realized quickly that this was very much done on purpose. And the fact that they've carried it through and they keep it, and it just creates this feeling, you get an idea of exactly who they are. And it works. It works for them. Their choice was very purposeful, and they did it in a way that was very successful. Another site is this Jones Barbecue. They come right in your face. You see exactly, it's very clear, it's very bold, it's very in your face. It's very easy to read. Their font style choices, their font size choices, their colors. They've just done a very good job in the choices that they've made for their particular site. It doesn't have to be that either. This is just something to show you. This isn't even actually a real site, but to show the feel, like a lot lighter, a lot more, a lighter flow to your first face, your intro, your homepage. It doesn't always have to be big and bold and in your face. It just needs to match the feeling that you're trying to convey. So the next thing I want to talk about, once you decide on what feeling you're trying to set up, what feeling you're trying to convey, we need to make sure that that message is readable, that the size is appropriate, the spacings are appropriate, the color works, and we always have to think about accessibility. And I'll get to that in just a minute. So some of the things that I've shown here, it doesn't matter what size your main, when I say hero headline, I mean like the largest font right here. I mean this first bit of copy that you see on the page. That's what I call the hero headline. That is just going to be dependent on what kind of design you've got going. And then all the other headlines on your page and subheads, I recommend whatever size you choose for that the subhead be about 4 pixels smaller than the main headline. And your body copy, at least 16 pixel equivalent. That is the most readable for your average user, and it's also in Google best practices. I've also listed what is recommended as far as spacing for best readability. The spaces around below. I have at the end of this session included a link to those, to a page that lists out like HTML line spacing and best practices for that and why. So after this, so what they've done, this is their main headline and their body copy and their spacing. And for the feeling that they've created, this works. It flows. It's very sorry, I got to try to not look at the chat while I'm doing this. I do get easily distracted. So anyway, they work this really well. It's a small bit of copy, but the least amount of copy that you can put to get your message across is the best, because people just won't read. But that's a side note. So I want to talk about readability a little bit as far as the color choices that you may pick. The first column I have is your basic black on white. It is very readable, but sometimes with the web, black on white you can kind of see some pixelization. So what a lot of people do to avoid that and to make things a little easier on the eyes, to make edges look a little bit smoother, is they will take the black down just a little bit. And this might be even a little bit too much, but just barely not black. So the darkest gray you can makes things just a little bit more readable, a little easier on the eyes. And the reversed, as long as you have a dark enough background, the white on dark looks, again, really nice, really readable. But there are certain color combinations just don't. This is one just don't. This was an actual website from, I don't even remember how long ago. They just loved green and blue. And there are certain colors that just do not work together. Just don't. Period. I just don't. So again, on the contrast and the colors, you can see that sometimes you can go a little bit too far with light contrast between the background color and your font color. So we are very aware right now on accessibility standards, and if you're concerned about readability for your website, I do have this at the last page of these slides, but this is the online contrast checker, and you can check your fonts against the background to see if it's going to pass. So things like the second column absolutely would not pass. The third one, while it looks nice, probably won't pass either. These are just standards that we try to accommodate for people with visual issues, people, just readability online standards. The last one, again, just don't. It's just too hard for anybody to read to try to get any content out of. Your message will be completely lost. So the next thing is font sizes. So usually things are listed in pixels as far as the web goes. Print is points, web is pixels. But we do what's called a pixel equivalent in that we usually use REMs. What that means is, so in print there were EMs, which is the ephemeral unit of measure, and the REM is just the same thing, only it just goes back to the root. So why that's important is you can set, as I showed on the right, how you would use this, how you would write this in your CSS code. In your HTML, you would set that size to the 62.5%, and it sets 1 REM equal to 10 pixels. So that makes it easy for you to use the REMs later and not have to remember what size an REM is, so that 1.6 REM can equal 16 pixels. And over 16 is usually your base size for what you want body copy to be, and everything else, is just bigger or smaller than that. But this is what the easiest thing for you to start out with. Now try to pull this up for the reason that we use REMs instead of pixels. I'll try to show you quickly. So let's say I set this first paragraph in pixels. Now if I try to zoom in, that one won't change. But the way it was set in REMs, if I uncheck that pixels, it will get bigger. So that's kind of why we use REMs instead of pixels, is that if someone needs to zoom into a site, that text does actually get bigger with the zoom, and you can zoom in to see things. So it's better for visual readability, accessibility. So one of the last things is to avoid image text. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, when they can't find a font that they want, they will instead just try to put the text in an image and use that at the top of a page, like in a header or something. Now, this is not talking about your logos and things like that. Obviously, those are going to be images and they need to be. But there are several reasons not to. One, it's not readable by either screen readers or by Google, and it can't see what you're trying to say. If that image didn't exist, if it didn't load, what you're trying to say is going to be lost. Yes, we can put that into things like alt tags and titles, but it's still best practice to try to use a font when you can. Also, that image text is not scalable. So if you're trying to do a responsive site, then when it goes to mobile or it goes smaller, that text is going to, you're either going to have to load a different image, it's just not going to be readable. There's so many fonts available that you can get close. You can even create your own and register it, and that part takes a little more coding knowledge, in that you can create a font and then you can export it and then import it into your site, and you can use it as a font instead of an image. So this is an example. The first screen of this site, this text here is an image. And it doesn't need to be, because later in their site, they use the exact same font. They've created this font. It is a custom font. It is actually called, the Topo Chico font. And they have created this and they've used it later. This is a web font here. So they didn't need to make an image for that font. They could have just used the web font that they created. So they did do something right, though. So what they've done, when I said they have this as an image, so as this scales, the image gets smaller. It is still fairly readable, and then when it flips to mobile size, they actually have it loading a different image. This does work for them. They just didn't have to do it this way. So the last line here, it's just showing you, like, this is pure CSS on font over an image. You don't have to use an image for it. There are so many things you can do with CSS that don't require you to embed text into an image. And then you have a lot more flexibility with what you do with that as your site scales, as your images scale. So I did manage to get through this a lot faster than I expected. As a recap, so the fonts are used to create a feel for your message. That creates, as much as the color that you use, as much as your imagery, your fonts really convey a message. And once you decide what feel you want, you just need to make sure that it is readable to your audience and make sure it's accessible, and try to practices. So here are some of the links to some of the resources I referenced in this session. And if you guys have any questions at this point, I'd be willing to take them. And also, if anyone ever has any questions beyond this session, you can always email me at my work email. I believe it's included somewhere. Oh, yeah, when I started working on the web in the 90s, No, I didn't. I mean, it was a very different beast back then. There were no responsive websites because we didn't know what it was going to be. It was just computers. Your phones didn't have websites on there. But quickly, and still on that, where it's been and where it's going, kind of excited to see things like the metaverse for other things, because what used to be an online shopping experience that was very surface, I think now we have the next, where it's going next is to design an actual store that you walk into. And how does that change how you design your setup? How does that change how you design what your site looks like? Because now your site can actually look like a physical thing. So you just have to keep up with what's current. You have to keep looking at what's next and what's there. Favorite font. I'm not sure that I have one. I used to, my favorite font for print and web is definitely different. It really just depends on what I'm trying to do. I used to, for my own personal things, liked Papaya, which is a very outdated font, I know. But I can tell you some common things we use on the web. Open Sans is still, I know that it is overdone, but it is the most readable body copy font that I've come across yet. And so we use that a lot with Roboto Slab and Montserrat for headlines. I I I have created my own font once a long time ago for a particular project. I was making a decal for one of my son's longboards, and it was kind of a, a mural sort of font. I don't have a reference to that real quickly, but I have once. Yes. No, I'd never use it again. You have to do every letter, yes. There are some, I haven't used them in a while, but there are some font creating programs where you only need to put in some of the main letters like A's and T's and Y's, things that are the most expressive, and then the font creation tool will fill in the rest of the letters based on what it thinks you're trying to do with the selection of letters. I don't have a good resource for that right now, but Google is a mess with that kind of information. If you go and look, I want to create my own font, and it will even tell you I want to export my font for my website. It'll tell you exactly what to do.